My name is Richard Cooper, and I am the president of NY Spin, a non-for-profit corporation. Let me take a few moments to thank our sponsors. First, tonight we thank NetCom Learning for hosting the event. We'd also like to thank our other sponsors. Big Visible has been a sponsor for several years. Turn to Tech, a New York tech school and free co-working space. Pearson Education, providing many of the books we raffle off. O'Reilly Media also provides some of the books we raffle off at our events. Darren Drake is a native of New Milford, New Jersey, where he served 4 years on the New Milford Board of Education, most recently as president. He completed his undergraduate degree at Rutgers in New Brunswick with concentration in political science and psychology. After working several years for the Speaker of the New Jersey General Assembly, he opted to change careers and attended Fairleigh Dickinson University. He earned his master's in business administration with a concentration in management information systems. In addition to his academic degrees, Darren is a certified associate project manager and a certified Scrum Master. Currently, he is employed by Fiserv, which is where we met, and where he acts as a Scrum Master for many projects across several different product lines, including one-on-one. So, ladies and gentlemen, Darren Drake.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Richard said, my name is Darren Drake, and I currently serve as a Scrum Master. We're not networking anymore. Okay. So does Agile empower the knowledge worker? You all know that this was the title of the presentation I was going to make tonight, but I really did struggle with a couple of different names. I came up with, does Agile empower the knowledge worker? Does Agile, a view from the trenches? Transitions, good and bad, that I've seen personally? So I just settled on this because as I was looking through some of the previous New York Spin presentations, it was, technology, very software specific, a lot of numbers, statistics, very empirical type data that you're looking at. This is more on the squishy side. This is more on human beings working together and how Agile really lets people be intrinsically motivated. You're going to hear me use that term a lot tonight. Because in addition to the book that Richard just spoke about, which is actually a fantastic book, I actually take a lot from Daniel Pink's Drive, which is all about motivation in the 21st century. And what I found from being a Scrum Master now is that people really do a lot better when they're invested in the product they're building. They're not building your product, they're building their product. So it just comes a lot more natural to people to be able to work diligently on something that they know they're going to be held personally accountable for. So it's not something that they just do and pass off to the next person. It's something that they're working collectively together to deliver and have their name virtually and almost literally put on it. So first I'd like to give you a textbook, what I would say, Agile versus waterfall example, but follow it through to the next step. Because normally, when I give you the example I'm about to give you, Agile sort of just stops. And they say, well, see, Agile's better. But I'm taking it to the next step. So you're going to see in a second. I'm going to use what I call the button example. We're all in software here. We all know what a button is. What buttons are required for, what buttons do, what they don't do, where they belong on pages. So the button example is my very, distilled version of a software project. So as I go through this, first I'd like to define my terminology up front. When I say empower, that is what I mean by empower. Knowledge worker. Knowledge worker is a term that you may have heard thrown around. This is what I mean when I say a knowledge worker. A person employed to produce or analyze ideas and information. And another concentrated thing I'd like to keep emphasizing here tonight is that at this point in our evolution, computers do not build computers. Human beings still build computers. So if you say, well, Darren, if you would put a whole bunch of statistics and stuff and empirical knowledge, I might believe you more. This isn't about that. This is about human beings and how they interact in a group dynamic setting as opposed to being a cog in a wheel. And, oh, by the way, I should have said this up front. If at any time you have questions, please feel free, because I couldn't be talking about a collaborative environment if I say, please hold all questions till the end, and I just talk a lot. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand or shout it out. So now the button. Now for this, I'm going to use a very simplistic, let's say, version of a waterfall assembly line. So it's going to be a very, you're going to recognize all the steps along the SDLC waterfall method, and you're going to be able to see where people fit in each way along the way. So even though there are going to be more steps here than you're going to see, mine is more like a distilled, watered down version. So the original functionality. Let's say someone in a business stakeholder product, end user requires a button to click through to log into our internal email system. Anybody have any questions on that? You should have a million questions, because there's a million steps this is going to take between a business analyst, tech person. So this is the general gist. So assuming the person isn't just working on this project or this product, let's say a month, to over the course of several weeks talk to the client and be able to write up the button. Gets pushed down the waterfall method to the analysis. Analysis goes through and says, okay, so where's the button going to be? How fast should the button be? Where on the page should the button go? Who should be authenticated to use said button? Where should they go when they hit said button? And all of those things are mapped out in the analysis phase, which is, again, standard textbook. That's the way that it is. So after the analysis phase, and let's say a functional specifications document is written, now it goes into the technical area. And construction or implementation, as you know, the PMI, as the PMBOK would tell you, begins. So the button, who's going to be on the database, what coding changes need to happen, HTML, script updates, all of those things occur. So now it's in construction. Now, after it's been constructed, quality, operations comes in. Okay, we're going to begin testing on said button. We're going to address any environmental issues, performance, and all of these things happen. So, servers get set up, blah, 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 1 month setup time. Okay. Congratulations. 6 months later, the team sits down with the original product manager and the client, and they see that on the screen. And they say, well, what'd you do? And she goes, oh, okay, well, what I do is I click the button, and then I just went to the landing page, so I put the landing page on my favorites bar, and I'm going to use the landing page. Where's the button? Why did we build the button? Why didn't we just stick with the landing page? The button was unnecessary in the first place. All of those months of work for that button that led to the landing page was all that was ever required. That was the value, being able to log in to get that. Now, you've probably all seen this before. This is where the Agile expert says, well, see, Agile's better than Waterfall. And they're probably right. But that's not the intent of this presentation. The intent of this presentation is that team, that word team. Now, you're sitting there as a developer, as a tester, as a business analyst, or the product manager. At this point is probably pretty embarrassed, saying, oh, yeah, well, it looks great. So now, what did you do for the last 6 months? You built, you tested something you now know will never, ever, ever be used. Your self-efficacy is in the basement because you just created something you know no one will ever add any value with. So this is where Motivation 2.1 kicks in with Daniel Pink. So when it comes to team self-efficacy and their engagement level, when it comes to really being able to get into the nitty-gritty of working hard, working diligently, putting quality at the forefront of their mind, what Pink does is he separates algorithmic versus heuristic. Algorithmic is the wheelbarrow basically replacing the horse and buggy, or just if it could be outsourced, it was already. Quicken, as opposed to a CPA. That's your definition of algorithmic. Heuristic is actually being able to think through problems, because in the beginning of every Agile, or any project really, you're tackling ambiguity. You're having to develop a solution to add value, and you're not 100% sure along the way of how you're going to get there. So, kind of like what General Patton said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. In this case, our enemy is ambiguity. Ambiguity will always hit you, and then the plan that you had is completely just not useless, but it's going to continuously need to be updated till the very end. And of course, that's the value add that Agile says is, why make a big upfront plan in the first place if you're going to need to change it iteratively along the way anyway? So this way, you're allowing the team to develop the plan while they're going through. So now, heuristic development. Heuristic development, what Pink said, is when they've done several different studies, they've shown not only that offering what he says motivation 2.0, which is, oh, you did a great job, here's more money. Not only does that not incentivize people, that disincentivizes people. Because motivation 2.1 is actually saying, wow, all of these human beings who are knowledge workers, they got into something where they didn't want to sit on an assembly line only with paperwork. They didn't want to put the left hand on a teddy bear only in paperwork. Because the moment that paperwork comes down, you're immediately tying that human being's hands. So they can't think abstractly. The moment you say a requirement comes down, I want X, Y, Z, Q, and R, that person just has to deliver X, Y, Z, Q, and R. They really don't have the ability at that point to say, well, that's okay, calm down, because you've already drawn on the whiteboard, normally I say blackboard, but nowadays whiteboard, you've already drawn in indelible ink on the whiteboard how you're supposed to go about it, leaving those team members with not a fantastic amount of room to actually imagine, not a fantastic amount of room to actually think abstractly.
Yeah, I just, about ambiguity, you're talking about kind of there's ambiguity at the beginning, and sort of one of the problems to solve is to continuously make something less ambiguous, figure out what it should do, and then you talked a little bit about feeling boxed in by super specificity, if you will. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on sort of this, because I face it as a product manager, where I'm at times thinking, ooh, Agile, that means I can be less upfront at the beginning because it's Agile, and we'll see, we'll learn, and we can be a little bit, and then I have other product managers saying, no, you need it to be way more specific at the front. So I'm curious if you can comment on that.
Well, I would say ambiguity, I would not just say there's ambiguity in the beginning, I would say there's ambiguity throughout. Because as you continuously move to different areas, new possibilities and new limitations will open up as you get to different plateaus along your way. So I think when it comes to being a product manager, and I'm going to get to this later in the presentation, but my I guess theory that I'm positing to you is separate the solution from the value. Separate what the solution is to what the value add really is to the client. Because as a business person talking to the client, you may think you're in the best situation to determine the solution. Because you're like, hey, I spoke to them on the phone. I know exactly what they want. I'm going to write it down and they're going to do it. And I'm going to show you later why that won't necessarily be the best case situation. Or why that might be, a fallacy of thinking. So here, I actually put in a couple of business people type responses. Because I figured I'd give you your best case argument against us. I know the industry, I speak to the clients directly, and therefore I'd be the best person to determine the solution. So that assumes that you assume the client knows 100% of what they're asking for on day one. And you assume you know the entire solution yourself. And you assume that you're going to be able to write that down in such a way to articulate to people with very different backgrounds what it is you want and how it is you want it to be delivered. That assumes that the document you're going to write contains all of those things, the assumptions that will be made after you put the pen down and hand it off to someone else. Assumptions will be made after you write that down. Because every different specific example is just very different. Or different use case or different edge condition requires people to think on their own. But you're not allowing them to think in the broad sense on their own because you've already locked down what the vast majority of the solution entails. So you're saying, I just want you to think abstractly on the edges. Where this situation where what I haven't described fully, completely answers the question, there and only there will I allow you to think and actually make a decision on your own. The toaster oven. This is one of my favorite examples because actually this goes right to that question. If you can try this tomorrow. If you go to get any bagel any morning and you ask them to make it hotter for you, they will push that button or they will turn the dial. And this happened to me. And I got so quizzical because I said, could you make it hotter? And they turned the dial up, and this rotator got slower. And I said, what the heck does that have anything to do with anything? I don't understand what the correlation is between heat being hotter and the rotator getting slower. So as I'm sitting there thinking, because it's so slow, I'm waiting for my bagel, I have 4 minutes to just think think abstractly. I'm like, I know what happened. Now that I'm in the software development industry, I said, okay, some product manager said, all right, I spoke to the client. I know exactly what the client wants. Client wants hotter bagels. I got it. They want it to be toasted. I'm going to write it up. More heat. Okay. Goes to the business analyst. Business analyst says, okay, they want hotter bagels. So, when you push this button, the heat will increase. Goes to technology. Technology says, you out of your mind? Don't they realize that there's fire equipment in these different areas that can't handle this level of heat? So what are we going to do? The engineers are sitting around, they're saying, what the heck are we going to do? I know what we'll do. What the value of that client is, they want their bagel to be toasted more. I know what we'll do. We'll make it slower. Because they'll think that it's toasted more. It won't actually be hotter, but they'll think it's toasted more. So, while I'm still sitting there waiting for my bagel, I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, this completely does not meet my needs at all. Now you've got this line behind me of people. I mean, granted, I'm going to get my bagel toasted more, but the original product manager should be happy. It's hotter. Not the way he intended it to be hotter, but it's hotter. So the original assumption of ambiguity, it solved the problem. The problem was solved of my bagel getting, but remember, the solution completely destroyed the user experience, but they made assumptions that created the value at the end. So the value was my bagel getting hotter. The solution was completely off the mark when it comes to what real human beings want, in real life. So pretty much that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, all right, let's say then the business person says, well, you know what, in the 21st century, we no longer build products. We build solutions to our clients' everyday problems. Okay, but do you really build the solution? Really? Is it you who builds the solution? Is it you who codes it? Is it you who tests it? You really don't. What you are trying to deliver is value to a client. That's what you're trying to deliver. You are trying to add value to an end user. At the end of the day, whether it's an internal customer, external customer, you're trying to add value. You have other people inside of the group that are adding value with you. So the question is, if you can just allow people to draw on that same whiteboard with you, you will not only allow them more engaged collaboration, I guarantee you do not know the full solution. You have a vague sense, back to that ambiguity, you have a vague sense of what the value is. But you know a certain amount of what the solution should entail. The business analyst knows a certain amount of what the solution should entail. Technology knows the limitations potentially of what the solution should entail. Quality assurance, and everyone in the team has a certain slice of the pie because the solution is not the value. There's no congruence between the two. The solution, you could have 7 different solutions that add the same value. You may not know which solution is the best. The team may know which solution is the best, and that team environment, that is where you're having increased engagement, increased self-efficacy going up, increased motivation. So you're going to have all of these things going with the team, increasing quality. And on one of the previous slides, I'm sorry, I went over it. Some of you might be saying, you know what, Darren, you're a young guy. People like money. Okay, I completely agree with you. People do like money. Then that's why MSN Encarta is the #1 encyclopedia now, and not Wikipedia. Because people got paid to make MSN Encarta. So that's why it's our #1 encyclopedia online, right? Not Wikipedia. Because no one got paid to put anything on Wikipedia. That's why Mozilla Firefox completely never existed. Internet Explorer, people got paid to develop that. No one got paid to develop Mozilla Firefox. That's why it never existed. People do things for free when they like to conquer creative tasks. And once you give them a creative tasks and appreciate the fact that they did not get into this industry, so to get into this industry just to be a cog in a large wheel, which is what Waterfall not automatically is, but lends itself to. Once you start to believe that people, once they feel empowered to change their world, are much better off when it comes to solving problems, being engaged to want to solve problems, working that extra, and it all comes down to me. To me, it all comes down to that one programmer that's there 4:59 p.m. and says, I could write this extra module. I'll be here an extra 5 minutes, but whatever, It all comes down to that one person. Because then that one person, and I don't know if I use this example sometimes at work as a Scrum Master. There's an old, and some people I work with saw it. There's an old, 14th century, for want of a nail. I don't know if some of you have heard of it. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the message was lost. For want of the message, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the war was lost. All for the want of a nail. So I do the same thing with tasks. For want of a task, the story was lost. For want of a story, the feature was lost. For want of a feature, the project was lost. And for want of the project was lost, the client was lost. All for the want of that 1 3-hour task. Because once you take it down to it's human beings working together, and if you think that you can just keep pushing them with a hammer on a nail type situation, you're not going to get the same level of engagement, the same level of satisfaction, the same level of quality out of solutions that you would get if you continuously try to push things onto them that they're not willing to be a part of themselves. So I guess that, unless you didn't realize the answer to the question, I figure I'd just give you the answer now. Agile does empower the knowledge worker. Agile most certainly does empower the knowledge worker, because when people get together and are invested in the solution and co-discovery, co-creation happens, it's really a magical thing. I mean, from just as a personal anecdote, one of the things I saw from being really why I wanted to have Agile in the trenches was being a Scrum Master with a delivery team that went from a pure waterfall environment now to a pure Agile environment. And seeing people being openly contentious, openly just talking to each other very aggressively between development, QA, business analysts, everybody. They weren't a team, and some of you might appreciate this. They were not a team, they were 4 people in a room. 4 people in a room does not make a team, you're just still 4 people in a room. And I think that's what some people thought early on in Agile adoption, that if you put 4 people in a room from different disciplines and say, tackle this, that automatically they're going to be engaged. But, getting back to what I said before, you already set the ground rules ahead of time. You need to have them think of the question, you need to have them not only think of the answer, help think of the question that leads to the answer. So, constantly coming together, joint collaboration, and just the ability to really come together and solve a problem as a unit completely changes a group's dynamic. That same group I was talking to you about before, really they were sitting, there was no co-location, they were sitting discipline-specific, QA, BA, development, getting them in the same room after 10 months of going through the normal interpersonal dynamics. You might have heard storming, norming, performing, that type of thing, where originally a team starts here, then they go down because they start arguing with each other, then they go up back to where they were, and then they completely succeed. I remember there was one day where we had something that was verboten before. It was a demo with the client, and the team was all there, and quality assurance and computer programmers would never have been involved with demos with the client to begin with it. But they saw this demo, and before the product manager could even turn off the call, developer had started developing it, the testers had started testing it, it was validated by the product manager before the business analyst had even finished writing the story in a Scrum environment. I mean, these people at the end of the tail of this project life cycle were so engaged. They worked through Thanksgiving weekend. No one asked them to. This team was so engaged to deliver this product that it was something that I had to see firsthand to be able to tell everybody, this actually does happen. people actually do get engaged at a very high level when you put them in the driver's seat. When you put them in the driver's seat, they get so empowered to change their world, and their self-efficacy gets so high that when you put a structure around them, you're only hurting yourself. You're hurting your organization's ability to be great because you're controlling your people's ability to be great. So allow your people to be great, and you will allow your organization to thrive as your people thrive too. So I think that's really the keynote, if I wanted to point something out of this presentation, is allow your people to drive your organization. Allow your people to move you forward. If they don't think of the answer the right time, the first time, that's what Agile allows, to continuously iterate, continuously retrospect, continuously get better. Because even in the Agile Manifesto, they say constantly uncovering new ways. They're telling you up front, we're not going to know 100% the answer every single time, but we're willing to get better every single time. Asymptotically, we're never going to get to be 100% correct, but we're constantly willing to get better. If you treat people like they're cogs in a waterfall machine, and you just allow them to only write documentation, the value internally, I was talking about value externally this whole time, the value internally of what exists is not documentation. Just like in economics, they say money is not valuable. Goods and services are value. Documentation is not value. What's in between your people's ears is value. Because not only will they not be able to document every single thing they know about a certain project or process, they have context, something that they can't write down, institutional knowledge of potential dependencies with other systems and software inside your company that they're not able to document. You're not losing if you lose one person because that person gets upset because they're really not being engaged on the right level, they're not being empowered to change their world. If you lose that one person, you're not just losing a collection of documents they've written. You're losing the documents plus all of the context between the documents, the context of the conversations they've been having, because if you know about Agile, the 3 C's, cards, conversations, confirmation. If you were to take, in theory, all of the documents that are written for a waterfall project, stack them up, send them to 2 completely different software firms, in theory they should look exactly the same when they're built out, spec'd out, and tested, because they're exactly the same. In theory. With Agile, a third is conversations. So if you were to take all the collection of the features and stories in a Scrum framework and give them to 2 different teams, you would get probably a 20 to 30% variance between the 2 different teams, because the different teams, A, got different feedback from the internal product management, B, got different feedback from different clients, and C, had different human beings working on it that had different skill sets. So assuming, again with the uncovering, recognizing the fact that everyone is different and the situations are different, you need to appreciate the fact that human beings driving software and empowering them to change their world is really the best way to go. Thank you very much for your time. If anybody has any questions. Alex.
Yes. So I'm my role in Agile is I'm a tech writer. Okay. And can you discuss how I would fit into that, or how any tech writer would fit into that kind of model in terms of, because I know you mentioned VAs, you mentioned QA, you mentioned developers, you mentioned product managers. So I know with tech writers we kind of parachute in at the last minute in waterfall and then write, but with Agile we're kind of at the beginning. So how would we be part of that creative process?
I would say that any group, whether you're operations, whether you're technical communications, any group, like I said before, the team understands 100% of what needs to be done, not any one different discipline. If you have outside teams that normally don't participate in project management methodology, whether it be waterfall or Agile, they might know things that the regular delivery teams or lifecycle, SDLC lifecycle people, bless you, don't know, like technical communications, the documents, certain standards you live up to that the solution we're currently building out does not dovetail with. That you could say, well, we normally follow things this way, we normally follow things that way. So it's just, you're adding to the overall collection of knowledge in that room. with the assumption that none of the single human beings in that room knows the answer, but you're always going to have a percentage you're never going to be at 100, but any other group's knowledge you add to that group gets you closer to 100. Like I said, asymptotically. You're never going to know 100% like the whole organization, but any other discipline you have represented at the table just gets you closer to that 100% of knowing exactly what's necessary for the solution to add the value.
Yeah, I would just kind of add that in some of the projects I've been on, like suddenly the project manager saw that stuff was kind of lagging and phone calls needed to be made on how to deliver mobile into Apple stores and into Google stores, and okay, it could have been the VA, could have been the product person, and instead she saw it was just not, and just made the calls and made progress and contributed, and I was like, I vow, thank you, just keep it moving.
And that's what I love, is having people on my teams like myself and other people I know, the BAs, that it's like, I don't really care if we're going left or if we're right, but I'll be damned if we're not going to move forward. So just constantly moving the ball, rolling forward, because only then are you going to be able to deliver something that's minimally viable to gain client feedback to develop a better quality solution. And that's really what you want to get at the end. Even if you don't have something that's 100%, with just getting constant iterative client feedback, you have something for them to begin to work with, and not just a vague, ambiguous, amorphous concept in your idea of what could potentially add value to the end user. So it's that constant client feedback and constantly moving the ball forward, that it's not just as simple in Agile as a project manager playing somewhat checkers of saying, okay, are we on schedule? If we are, okay. If we're not, I'll escalate to senior management, or okay, or doing a weekly status call. It's not quite that easy. Being in an Agile team means you constantly have to continuously motivate the team, get the team's feedback, and just constantly retrospect to understand how you can make your team better. So, I hope that answers your question. Yes?
It's the usual picture I have of Agile teams, what you said, is like, forming, storming, norming, forming, whatever. And then it's like nirvana after that. But I don't know how long, how much time you've experienced this. A lot of us are new to Agile, so after like a year or two, what happens to teams? Do they sort of lose steam? Do people need to be put into a new team, or do people tend to? Is there ways of handling it to make people sort of stay with a lot of longevity for certain?
Well, you're right. The Agile Scrum framework does have the team going out ad infinitum, just continuously going, and never really stopping. Like how a project just has a clearly defined beginning, clearly defined end. So what I've seen is, I've seen bad ways of managing a delivery team and good ways of managing a delivery team. Because of course in Agile dogma, you want to bring work to the team. You don't want to put a team around work, because that team has inherent build-up, inherent velocity, steam rolling, basically, for lack of a better term. It has steam behind it. So what I've seen on one project is what senior management does. They say, well, this team is doing great. If we rip this team in half, put them on other teams, they'll be just as great. That doesn't work out as well as you think, because they're used to dealing with the same people. You have different human dynamics. See, that's why I said this is squishier, because you have real human beings interacting in a group setting where some people might shut down. And it's not that they don't want to help, it's that they don't know how, or they don't know what they're being asked. They're not willing to go out of their comfort zone. So you have all these different types of interpersonal dynamics at play. So that's the bad way of taking a good team and splitting it up in half. The good way is having a team, but let's say you are doing Java and you need more .NET expertise on your team. Keep the Java people there and have some .NET people come on. Keep the same testers, the same business analysts. Try to keep as much of the team cohesion as you can while bringing in one or two people. Because I forget the name of it. It was a Harvard business study that said if you want to actually have successful change in your organization, what you should do is you should have small teams where you don't try to say, okay, everyone do Y. Today we do X, everyone do Y. You have a team of, let's say, 10 people that all is good already in Y. You have one Xer go over to the Y and slowly become acclimated to the Y environment, then a second person, then a third, because it's more likely that one person will acclimate to a surrounding group of 10 other people than if you tell 10 people at once just to snap immediately and change. So that's one of the ways they said to do it. Now, to your question about what happens at the tail end of a delivery team, there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. Everything runs out of speed eventually. Some people get tired of the product they're working on. They want to explore other avenues. One thing that could happen, if you have a current quality assurance person, they could be the business analyst this time around. If you have a current quality assurance expert that also does .NET programming, they could do .NET. You're still dealing with the same people, but they're co-learning skills, and they're still dealing with each other just in different ways, and they're feeling challenged in new ways than they were before. So that ability to learn in cross-training, that's what I was looking for, cross-training skills while you're still working together really helps everyone. Because now, as an organization, you have people that have multiple skill sets, and as an organization, you have the team that has been working together now for over a year and is fantastic at that point at what they're doing. So I think constantly challenging the team in new areas, in addition to empowering them, is the way that you keep moving that team forward and keep that that carrot in front of the horse's mouth to keep making it run faster, keeping going on and on.
So currently my team, I work in consulting for process and quality, and the way my team's organized is, I think a lot of other teams, there's a lot of offshore and onshore, and this geolocation is a problem where having them interact, it seems like Agile requires a high level of communication between all the team members, right? So if you're not geolocated together, how would you overcome those challenges?
One, I know people who sit literally 3 feet away from each other that won't talk to each other. Two, you have an industry that for the past 35 years has been going to the far reaches of the world to get cheap labor. Now you have a project management methodology that's saying, oh, by the way, everybody has to be sitting right next to each other and talking. So, you say, okay, how do I take the square peg and slam it into the round hole? Several different ways. Scheduling meetings. A lot of Scrum meetings, daily stand-ups, sprint reviews, sprint planning, sprint retrospectives. Always have them in as much of the overlap time as you can in the morning. Other than that, always dedicate a certain amount of your sprint retrospective to what else can we be doing for offshore coordination? What else do you need from us? Or what else do we need from you? Get some type of robust document sharing website, like a SharePoint, something like that you can have local documents that both sides could continuously update. I mean, there's no silver bullet. I really don't think there is a silver bullet. When I took my Certified Scrum Master training, it was funny. He said, I think that Agile isn't a silver bullet, it's a silver mirror, because it'll show you the problems you have immediately, as opposed to 12 months down the road when you get to the implementation phase. So I think that the offshore coordination is a big challenge right now in Agile, because in Waterfall, the theory is, well, if I just do a huge document, they'll be able to build it. I don't think that works out 100% all the time, but I think that from what I've seen, they enjoy the collaboration as well as the onshore people enjoy the collaboration, because they also enjoy thinking abstractly and becoming part of the solution, not just having things handed to them and saying, this is the expected outcome we want. Have fun. So that's what I've seen, that they respond to the same type of heuristic motivations of the intrinsic motivation that onshore people have.
Yeah, I'm on a Pacific Coast, East Coast, Bangalore, and so the calls are always, you hear the kids in the background in Bangalore. 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, Pacific Coast, they're just trying to wake up. And the East Coast, it's kind of sweet. You really kind of got the good, best time. But it's definitely limiting. I mean, we're not doing that daily. It'd be way too much for the. But I think what you're saying about, the intrinsic. I think Bangalore folks, they're happy to be part of this team, of this ecosystem of people. And we're all trying. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to co-locate more of the BA. Because right now the BAs are here. We're going to do more BAs in Bangalore. So kind of get the QA dev, kind of get that going there, and product here, and Scrum Master there. So I mean, we're wrestling with these things right now. So.
Any other questions?
We've talked about teams that are not co-located, that are globally located. What if your clients are as well? What if there are multiple clients that are going to be using this thing you're building, and they also are geolocated and perhaps come from different areas of the business and have different priorities? How do you what's an effective way to manage that?
You're saying the clients are located together?
No, the clients are not located together. There's some, like you said, in Switzerland, London, Singapore, and New York.
Do they want the same? I would think that if they're in the same industry, if they're end users of the same application, would the value then be the same depending upon what clients they are? If it's in the same industry and you're offering the same solution set.
Yeah, some clients value speed of response, speed to market. Others value more highly ability to be transparent to regulators, for example.
Then the requirements would probably change by client. I mean, you're going to get different feedback from different clients. Like I said before with the toaster example, different feedback from different clients is going to lead your solution set in different areas, and how you adjust that accordingly with spinning it off into a different team or having one team work on multiple lines of the same solution set. I would think that you would just have to judge that as it comes, whether it comes to more iterative releases and you release iteratively to certain clients, release in big chunks to other clients, include certain features that are maybe non-functional requirements for one client but are functional requirements for another client, include them, and you would just need to treat them as separate projects, almost client-specific, but again, still driven by the same delivery team because only they would have the context and the motivation and the drive to understand the full ramifications of what they're delivering and why they're delivering what to who. So, and understand what their motivation is for wanting that specific requirement set. Yes.
Any general advice about management having less control over a team in this kind of agile approach, but selling the idea to management, saying, "Oh, this is a good thing." A lot of managements resist that.
Well, I'm sorry? Oh, the question was lack of management control over a delivery team, as opposed to like a discipline-specific computer programmers and a manager, quality assurance testers and a manager. Well, I don't think that the book has been, officially locked down and written as to what is 100% the right way to go in this situation. But I think that when you look at the motivation that I showed before of products that have been built out by people that were not even paid to begin with, like Wikipedia, like Linux, like Mozilla Firefox, you have those things that have been built out a lot with no pay at all. It shows that if you're a manager, what do you want? If you're a manager, you want to hit the goals your senior manager has given you, and you want to build working, tested software as fast as humanly possible and deliver to clients' expectations. If you want to be a manager just to manage people, I think that's a different set of skills that you're bringing to the table. If you just want to manage people, you could still get reports and metrics and readouts of all the things that they've been doing, what product they're currently working on. You could still get that. But the thing is, you need to appreciate that they are part of something that is bigger than just themselves. And they will only be able to give you a slice of what they're currently adding to the value of it. So while you're saying I'm losing oversight over my direct report, I'm losing oversight over my people, you're gaining a person that is feeling empowered to do a lot more than they would be if they had constraints of process really rung over their shoulders. So I think it's a trade-off you have to make, and you have to be willing to invest in it, not just for a month or 2 months, but actually after half a year. Look at it and say, what have we really accomplished this 6 months in Agile versus what did we do the past 6 months, the past 18 months, and how is my associate that I'm concerned about losing management oversight over, how have they grown over the past 6 months as a part of this team, as opposed to just writing code, writing spec, writing test cases over the past 18 months. How do they feel, and do I think that they're slacking off? Do I think that the other team members are thinking they're not contributing? So I think that you really need to judge that human being over the course of that span of time they've been on Agile and on discipline specific to say, what do I want to be as a manager? Do I want to encourage my associates to flourish and grow? And if that is so, then measure what they've done on Agile projects as opposed to what they've done on SDLC.
Any other questions?
Oh, I have to ask a really ugly one. I'm
Go
sorry.
for it.
This is a really ugly question. Speaking of management oversight, everybody has riffs, everybody lays people off. If you've got this team that's going great, and this team that's going great, this team that's going great, and you're a manager who's got, let's say, a QA person in each team, how are you going to come up with some reasonable, and say you've got 10 people spread across teams, how are you going to pick that one person at the end of the year that you've got to let go because senior management says you've got a haircut? It's going to be so individual. What judgment do you use to rank them and prioritize their value to the organization when they're working on stuff that's so disparate?
Their value to the organization. When you say their value to the organization, I'm thinking, how much do they bring? How much are they mentoring others? How much are they contributing to the collective consciousness of the group? Are they doing over and above things that the other people are doing in their delivery teams, Scrum teams, for instance? Have they done, like I said before, volunteered to cross-train others? And have they volunteered in, if there's been a lack of a certain discipline, if they're a business analyst, could they say, I could pitch in and test, because we're at a lack of quality assurance people at this time? There are many opportunities in a delivery team setting for people to shine and go over and above, and it's just a matter of keeping track of those little nuggets of really people going over and above the line in Call of Duty. That I think that's the thing that you keep track of, and everybody on the team will know about it. It will be an open secret that the people who go over and above really are going over and above. So while you may look at a team and say that's the team, if you talk to the Scrum Master, you talk to whoever is involved in the team, they'll be immediately able to tell you what things over and above the regular Call of Duty those people have done. And then I would probably think you would line up each one of those quality assurance people and say, what have they done over the call, over and above duty, and set the mark there.
Any other clean or dirty questions? All right, then how about a great round of applause for
Thank you.